Welcome to the Horror Hallucinations. Warning, this channel is dedicated to horror and mystery stories. If you prefer these topics, then you are in the right place. The Devil's Eyes Story. Some amateurs are driven by their hobbies into experiences that are engraved in their memory for a long time, and left traces in their souls and even their lives that cannot be easily erased. What happened with George II? George is a young man in his mid-30s. He works as a history teacher in a secondary school for boys. He is very passionate about history and antiquities, especially ancient churches and their fragrant antiquities, sculpture, decorations, and everything that is beautiful and old. George's trips to ancient churches were his chance, which he gets every weekend to visit and benefit from it, and see it on the ground. One day during the school days, George was sitting in the library browsing one of the old books that talked about ancient churches, and among them was an old church that contained a painted painting, which the writer described as the ugliest painting a human being could see. This description aroused George's curiosity to know the content of the painting, and he decided to go out to see the church and its contents during the weekend. The end of the week came and George went to the town, in which the church was located and was adjacent to his city, and as soon as he reached it, he parked his car and set out on foot, through a forest with many dry trees, and he walked a little and then found the door of the old church, so he opened it to make a loud creak, then go inside. George found everything inside the church antique, and rightly so. What wonderful antiquities it is. So he spoke to himself, and began to examine every corner inside it. Then suddenly he raised his eyes to the wall to find the painting. An old stucco painting. Written on the painting that it is forbidden to touch it in any way, shapes, otherwise I will be cursed. George smiled and said to himself, there must be some excitement in those old places, to give some fun and passion to the visitors. And quad. George contemplated the painting, which depicts the devil torturing some people, where there were some devils drawn accurately at the top, standing holding their pointed thorns, and planting them in the breasts of people, whose features were marked on all signs of terror, and at the bottom there was a devil with thick hair and two eyes looking forward to you with clear malice. How true that painting is, George said that sentence to himself, and suddenly he glimpsed the devil below, smiling at him and moving his fork. He felt the painting and the part that had fallen, and he was terrified. What could he do? He had inadvertently destroyed an antique part of an ancient painting that some might value, now in the million. George left, shaking off the dirt after falling to the ground, then drove his car back to his house. In the evening, George woke up after witnessing a horrific nightmare, and this demon had thick hair and was black in color, placing him on an altar and trying to devour him. The next morning, George had not slept well because of the nightmare that attacked him. So he went to work and began to eat his breakfast and look at the newspapers, and he found in them news about a man with thick black hair and red eyes who had attacked a child, next to a forest with dry trees, and he devoured all his internal bowels. So George was terrified and hurried back to his home. It is the curse of the painting. George drove his car and went to the church, and he found a priest sitting in front of it, and his features carried worries that no human could bear. So George asked him for permission to sit with him. So he gave him permission and they sat talking together. And George told him what happened. So the man stood up in panic, and said to him, "Did you touch the painting?" George answered him that yes. So the man became more frightened and told him that he was the one who killed the child, because the painting cursed him. Suddenly, George's features changed and his body changed, with thick hair growing rapidly over his body, and his eyes turning red. He suddenly attacked the priest and carried him on his shoulders into the church to devour.